ولا عجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان أرضه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين واللعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقان الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Saf, the 61st surah, ayah number 8, tells us that the desire to put out the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah will perfect His light though the unbelievers may be averse. We have been discussing the subject of the Imam of our time, Imam Al-Hujja Qa'im Ali Muhammad Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. And we have discussed a few items on this particular subject, and that is the circumstances during the birth of the Imam, the miraculous marriage of the parents of our Imam, the birth of our Imam, the principles of the promise of Allah as a reality, and intizar, awaiting the Imam, and our role and responsibilities in brief. Today we want to go to another aspect before we go on to the ghaibah of the Imam, and that is the beginning of the imamat of our Imam. In order to be able to do that, we will have to go into a little history of the 11th Imam, our beloved Imam Hassan al-Askari, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Imam al-Askari alayhi salam was martyred in the year 260 Hijrah at the age of 28 only by Mu'tabid Abbasi. This is the second youngest Imam of the 12 or the 11 that were martyred, and that is after the 9th Imam who was martyred at the age of only 25. The Imam of our time at that time was only 5 years old. And some of the reasons for killing or martyring, rather the shahadat of the Imam presented by historians, are some things that we need to understand so that we may get a glimpse of what were the circumstances at that time. The Imam was the most eminent in the population of the Muslims at that time. Especially the Shias considered him and revered him as their leader and Imam. Due to the tyrannical rule, the Banu Abbas were always tyrants, even more than the Banu Umayyah. And oppression of the Banu Abbas, the Muslims were revolting in various groups and in various places of the Muslim world. And now the time had come that they were openly opposing the regime of Banu Abbas. They even labeled them as corrupt openly and denounced them openly, and they were inhuman. The human aspect was out from their dictionary, let's say. Because of all this, their focus became the Imam of the time, that if they can oppress and suppress the Imam of the Ahlul-bayt, the people who follow the Shia belief and the Shia creed would automatically get down and be controlled. That was the target. Now, the Banu Abbasi on one hand knew of the prophecy of Rasulullah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that it is going to be the ninth descendant of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein who is going to be the Qaim of Al Muhammad and who is going to establish justice and equity on land. They knew this prophecy and they understood it, that since Rasulullah has said it, it is going to happen and will happen. And therefore, ever since the time of the ninth Imam, their torment of the Ahlul-bayt and the Imams of the Ahlul-bayt was more and more severe, and it was at its height during the time of the 11th Imam. They were even terrified at the mention of the name of the Qaim, because they knew that should he come and should he take the mantle, he would destroy them and their rule, and they will lose everything that they have gathered for so many years. And they were concerned about their being cut off from power, and they were sure that this would happen. So they even plotted to prevent the 11th Imam from making his own family. And that is why we see that they prevented people going to Imam's house, or they were keeping a lot of security and scrutiny on who was in the Imam's house, who was a female, whether she was pregnant or married to the Imam or was close to the Imam. There was a lot of scrutiny, and there was a lot of what we say is something that they always watched all the time. To the extent that amongst the servants that were working within the household of the Imam, these were corrupted so that they could report to the government and the administration of what was happening in that house. And this is what they wanted. They wanted to prevent the birth of the Imam. And that is why our 11th Imam, in one of his letters after the birth of the Imam of our time, writes and says, they thought, the enemies, they thought, Imam writes, that they could plan and murder so that my progeny may be cut off. The Imam has said this, and he says, but the Almighty Allah rendered their word and their plots ineffective. Thanks and gratitude is only to Allah the High. So we can see that even the Imam knew of their plots. And this was known to the public as well as the Shia world, and that is why we see that the 10th Imam actually planned the marriage of our 11th Imam with the mother of the 12th Imam, Narjis Khatun. The Alawi Sadat, that is from the Banu Ali, that is, as we know, during the time, had raised their voices and stood up against the government. And they had stood up for human rights, to protect human rights. Yet these were trampled by the Abbasid caliphs, one after the other. These revolts that were happening, because when you suppress a population, there is always more revolt that emanates out of it. If it is inhuman and if it is undue and unjust, it is definitely going to bring more revolt. So this was happening at a faster pace. And their deadly and their main concern, obvious reaction was to suppress this with deadly force. They used to kill Shias, and specifically the Alawite Sadat, in hundreds and in numbers that cannot be even estimated. They also increased their wrath towards the Imam. They wanted to put a lot of pressure on the Imam to stop the Alawis from revolting. But the Imam could not do that. And their target was that they had meted more atrocities, torture, persecution, and pressure onto the Imam. However, Imam could not give in to unjust demands. And besides all this, there was that overriding factor that has been there from day one, from the day of Saqifa. And that is the jealousy that was against the Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam. That the people who saw that power was with the Ahlul-bayt, they did not spend anything in attracting people. They never bribed anyone to come to them. They never persecuted anyone to come to them. Yet the attraction they had was on the hearts of the people, that they were attracted to the Imam of the Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam. They never bought out people the way the tyrants did of Banu Umayyah and Banu Abbas. Because the purpose that was there, or the plan and the system that was there from the time of Muawiyah, was twofold. Whenever there was any opposition, the first option was to buy people out by giving them money and corrupting them, or if that did not work, then persecute them, destroy their family, business, farms, and whatever means of earning, or their families as well. However, the Imams never employed this, yet they managed to attract the people, and this was burning a fire of jealousy in these hearts. The Banu Abbasi at that time employed three very specific systems and policies that they executed in its entirety as well as in severity. They were very severe in these three policies. First was they imposed strict economic sanctions and embargoes on the Ahlul-bayt, the Shias of Ahlul-bayt, the families of Ahlul-bayt, and the friends of Ahlul-bayt. These sanctions were such that you could not even visit the Imam, because the moment anyone saw you visiting the Imam, your family, your business would be affected. The second one was the imprisonment of the Imam himself. He was transferred. In that young age of 28, he spent more than half his life in prison, from one to the other dark dungeons of the people of Baghdad and Samra. And third, they imposed restrictions and surveillance on Shias so as to deny them meeting with the Imam. Now, when we look at these three principles of oppressing and suppressing a leader, we can see that these are tools that are employed even today. This is not something new that is being employed today in every country where there is oppression. That they look at the leaders, the first thing is impose sanctions, put them under restriction, and finally even persecute them by imprisoning them under false pretenses. And these are the similarities of the politics of yesterday as well as today. And today when we see and we look at the history, Mu'tamid, when he killed and martyred the Imam of the time, that was the 11th Imam, he employed two distinct contrary faces. One was for public, one was what he was doing. In exact similarity to what his great-grandfather Ma'mun al-Rashid did with the 8th Imam. Exactly the same way. On the face value in front of the public, they wanted to show that they love the Imam, they are behind the Imam, they follow the Imam of the Ahlul-bayt, but in actually and in reality, they were the ones who were actually opposing, oppressing and torturing the Imam. When Mu'tamid had killed the Imam, on one hand he ordered that the Imam must be honored and that all officers in position must give him a state funeral. A state funeral was ordered, in which the generals, the army personnel, the defense, the judiciary, the government organization, including all the elite of Banu Abbas, were compelled to attend. This was one side of it. And the entire population of Samra came on that day to the Banu Hashim. And in fact, everyone condoled each other for the great loss that each had suffered, because it was the Imam of the time that had been martyred. On the other hand, he sent 5 very special agents of his, and the 6th one was his own personal servant by the name of Nahrir to the house of the Imam. This is upon the martyrdom of the Imam. After he had served the poison to the Imam, he had given explicit instructions not to leave for these people, not to leave the side of the Imam and report every movement of who is coming to the Imam, who the Imam is talking to, what are the women of that household doing, and if there was anyone who was pregnant in that whole fleet of or people in the household of the Imam, she must be taken away straight away to the administration of the Mu'tamid rule. On one hand, he ordered all the markets and all the government offices closed in order to mourn the loss of the Imam. On the other hand, he raided the entire compound of the Imam. He raided and he took away the people or the police or the sawak of that time, as we say, were the ones who actually destroyed the property of the Imam's household. It was such a situation that the whole compound was sealed off from anyone going in, and they were undertaking to destroy the Imam's household. On one hand, he ordered one of the nastiest people of the time, Abu Isa ibn Mutawakkil, the son of the most notorious ruler of Banu Abbas. He asked him to conduct the funeral rites and recite Salatul Mayyit over the Imam. On the other hand, he ordered a strict vigilance on the household of the Imam. If there were any people that were there that were too close to the Imam, they must be taken as prisoners. This was an exact repetition of what Ma'mun had done with Imam Rida alayhi salam and his family, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. However, at the time of the martyrdom and the funeral of the 11th Imam, it is said that the convergence of the people of Samara was such that the multitude of people were never seen like that before or after the Imam's martyrdom. It is unfortunate that even today the circumstances are such that it is so difficult to even go to Samara to do the ziyarat of the Imam of that time. During the funeral, there are two events that are very specific that we must also understand. The first is the event of Ja'far, which is the son of our 10th Imam, Imam Aliun Naqi Al-Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam. It is recorded in history that the Imam's body was washed and given kafan by some very close friends of the Imam and his companions, which were headed by none other than the very first naib of our 12th Imam, by the name whose name is Sheikh Abu Amr Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri. He is the one who was heading that group of people who washed the body of the 11th Imam and gave it kafan. And when it was time for prayers, Ja'far, the son of the 10th Imam and the brother of 11th, led the prayers of Janazah of the 11th Imam. People who were present, however few they were, they began questioning Ja'far of who this young child was. Did the Imam have a child? And Ja'far simply said, I do not know. I have never seen him before, nor do I know about him. The second incident is after the funeral and after the burial of the Imam, there was a delegation from Qom who had come. When this delegation came to Samara, they learnt that the Imam was already martyred and was already buried. They had come to specifically meet the Imam, and they had come with certain hukuk. When they learnt of this, they were told by the people in Samara that Ja'far ibn al-Hadi had assumed the imamat after the 11th Imam, the brother of the 11th Imam. But at that particular moment in time, he had gone on a vacation to the river Tigris with some of his singers and parties that were there to party at the riverside. The people knew immediately that this could not be the right Imam. Because the Imam of the Ahlul-bayt would not only not go towards a sinning moment, they do not even go near karahat that is there. This is the Imam of the Ahlul-bayt. So they waited, however, till they came. The 11th Imam had a practice that before even they said what they had and why they had come, the Imam would inform them of what they had come with, whom they had come, who had sent the amanat, what was the amanat, what was the amount of the amanat, and all those things that were pertinent to that amanat in the full detail. So therefore, they asked Jafar that if you are the Imam after the Imam Askari alayhi salam, then you must adopt the same sunnah by telling us exactly what we have and who we have it from. At this time, Jafar started screaming at them and saying, are you attributing ilmul ghaib to the Imam? My brother had no ilmul ghaib. That is only an exclusive right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they said that we cannot do anything because this was the practice, and our amanat has a condition that we must establish that the Imam is proved that he is the Imam. So what happened at that time is Jafar rushed to the Abbasid Khalif and asked him to pressure this delegation to deliver all the news that were due to the Imam. When this delegation was brought to the court of the Abbasid Khalif and they were asked about this, they explained the situation that whenever we have come, this was how the Imam treated us and this is how he told us what we had and we used to deliver it to him, and therefore we are asking so that we can satisfy the people who have actually given us this amanat, so that we can satisfy them that we have given it to the right person. And therefore, the Khalif also at that time could not do much, because he asked Jafar that if you are in a position of the Imam, then satisfy their demand. If not, they are only agents, we cannot pressure them any more than that. So they went back with this. As they went back with this, Jafar was furious. And Jafar went back home, and once he was at home, he began to think about how to counter this. On the other hand, the Abbasid Caliph gave protection to this delegation up to the end of the city, by the city limits, that no one should harm them because they are having certain wealth with them and there should not be undergoing any form of mistreatment. When they left the city boundaries, there was a young man who came towards them and said, do you want to see the Imam of the time? And they asked him, are you the Imam of the time? And they said, no, I will take you to him. So this young man took the delegation to the Imam. They say we saw a young man dressed in green, sitting on a platform very simply, and when we went there after doing our salutation, he welcomed each one of us by our names and told us exactly our mission. He also gave us all the details of the amanat that we had. He also told us of what had already transpired in Samra. He took the amanat from us because we were satisfied that he was the Imam of our time. But at that time, the Imam did two things. One was he told them that from now on, do not come to Samra with any amanat, but you can give them to our agent in Baghdad. And the second thing is the Imam from himself gave a kafan and some kafur for hunut to one in the delegation whose name was Abu Abbas as a gift. And as they were leaving, as the delegation left the Imam's side and they were going home, Abu Abbas passed away on the road. And that is how the kafan and the hunut was used for him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Having been humiliated, Jafar now came with a 20,000 dinar sum and gave it to the Abbasid Khalif so that he could bestow upon him the position of Imamat over the people. The answer of the ruler of Banu Abbas is very profound that we must comprehend. And we have tried to break it down so that we may understand this whole statement of the Caliph of Banu Abbas. He said, the elevated position that the Imam had was not something that was conferred upon the Imam by this Khilafat. First thing he says is it was not conferred by Khilafat. It was something that Allah had granted upon him. So if you are looking for being conferred upon the Imamat, go and seek it from Allah. The second, he says, the respect and honor that the Imam commanded was also not demanded or conferred upon by the Khilafat. It was also something that was granted by Allah, and the Imam was given that power of attraction. In fact, he says, the Khalif says, that the Khilafah tried exhaustively to diminish the elevated position as well as the respect and honor of the Imam throughout his life. All this, then he says, however, perfection in knowledge, merit and virtues of the Imam was only granted to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, if you, Ja'far, have all these traits and qualities that your brother had, and should the Shias acknowledge you at the same level, the Khilafat has got nothing to do with it but accept it as you as the Imam after him. However, if the Shias of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam do not recognize you, O Ja'far, for the merits of him being their Imam, any assistance from the Khilafat would also be useless for you. Because we can't do anything much, because if the Shias will not acknowledge you, you cannot be their Imam. Despite all this, however, we know that the Imam had entered into a turbulent era in his life. And at this time it is said, history has however recorded, that Ja'far, the son of Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, repented and did tawbah, and therefore thereafter he had done tawbah. However, whenever we talk about Ja'far as the brother of the Imam, of 11th Imam, we remember another brother on the day of Ashura in Karbala. That was none other than Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, who on the night of Ashura, when Shimr, one of the cousins of his mother, comes to him and calls out to him, "O Abbas, the son of my sister, come, we have brought to you an aman nama, we have brought to you amnesty for you and your brothers." Abul Fadl Abbas at the onset did not even answer him, but when Imam told him to go, he goes and says, there be la'nat on your aman nama, and you, the one who brings it, you are bringing a security for me and the Imam of the time, the son of Fatima, the son of Rasulullah, has no security. How can that be possible? This was a brother who was so loyal that on the day of Ashura, just before the time of Asr, he comes to the Imam and says, "Oh Abdullah, oh my master, give me permission also to go and fight for your cause." And Imam says, "How can I grant you permission, oh my brother? You are the commander of my army." And Abbas says, "But where is the army now? Who's the commander am I?" Imam says, "However, you can go and do sabil for the children, go and fetch some water, but before you go to the tent and say Khuda Hafiz to Zainab." So Abbas comes to the tent, but he could not ask permission from Zainab. He just puts his head down, and Zainab says, "I know what you have come for, O Abbas. Shamiya bastande bazu Zainabo kulsumra." This is the time when Abbas goes, and he was so much loyal to the Imam that he did not keep the cause of the Imam away from him. Even after he took took water and was coming to the camp, his only prayer was, Ya Allah, let this water reach the children of Hussein. But when there was an arrow that came into the mashk of Sakina, Abbas turned his horse backwards, and when he fell, he said, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. And Hussein said, today my back is broken. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة.